Eu sabia que eu tinha muitas oportunidades aqui se eu entrasse. E foi o que aconteceu. É um envolvimento com as pessoas fora do campus.
Meu maior sonho era estar aqui e cheguei até aqui e sonhei muito em entrar aqui, não sei como sair, porque eu amo essa escola, me transformou muito.
Eu não sou somente uma agroecóloga e domino os conhecimentos, eu sou uma pessoa que eu consigo transformar outras pessoas. Eu não faria isso se eu não estivesse dentro de uma instituição que fosse comprometida com o estudante, comprometida com o ensino e com a extensão como o IFPE é.
Quando eu fiz o curso técnico aqui, tive a oportunidade aí de receber Bolsa Atleta, né? Eu fui seguir uma das grandes aptidões aí que eu aprendi também aqui junto do IFPE, foi me tornar um grande atleta de xadrez. Uma das grandes virtudes assim que eu vejo aqui do IFPE é que ele dá essa oportunidade de você se verticalizar, né? Eu acho isso muito bonito, assim, você poder até se tornar de repente um professor do próprio campus, assim, que você estudou a vida toda.
Estou aqui realizando um sonho de fazer engenharia. E esse universo do IFPE me abriu várias portas, né? Abriu para a iniciação científica, isso despertou em mim um interesse que talvez até eu não tivesse, que foi a questão acadêmica.
Eu comecei a trabalhar com pesquisa e para mim é uma experiência muito grande. A gente consegue ter o contato com a população externa e ao mesmo tempo desenvolver o nosso plano de atividade na pesquisa e levar de volta, além dos muros da instituição, aquilo que a gente consegue de resultado. Para mim é algo muito gratificante.
Terminar a graduação dentro da universidade e o conhecimento que você adquiriu dentro dessa universidade, você trazer e aplicar ela dentro da sua comunidade, tentar ajudar e contribuir de alguma forma. Essas mudanças todas que eu estou falando, esse tipo de experiência, eu tive depois que eu comecei a entrar no IF.
Sou a única aluna aqui no campus que tem deficiência visual. A gente também conta com o NAPNE, que é o Núcleo de Apoio às Pessoas com Necessidades Específicas. Esse núcleo, ele, independente de qual for a deficiência, ele está apto a ajudar o aluno que necessita.
Fazer esse concurso da empresa que eu trabalho hoje, eu só pude fazer graças à minha formação, porque todas as disciplinas, todo o conteúdo aplicado na prova, eu só tive condições de realizar devido à aprendizagem que eu tive no curso. O IF abre os horizontes para a gente ver novas oportunidades, tanto de vida quanto de mercado de trabalho.
A área naval é uma área bem voltada para homens, assim, um mercado bem masculino, porém nos deu a oportunidade de começar também lá a ingressar nessa área. E isso a instituição do IFPE foi quem me deu essa abertura de visão, né? É através dele que a gente consegue se capacitar de fato e ficar a nível do que as empresas precisam.
Eu sou cotista aqui, eu sou beneficiado com a Bolsa Permanência, que é uma ajuda de custo que existe para os alunos daqui. Essas pessoas que moram longe, mas querem fazer os cursos que aqui são oferecidos, têm essa oportunidade.
É um mundo diferente para mim, eu sou feliz aqui.
Eu me sinto tão bem aqui no Instituto.
Eu realizei meus sonhos e muitas pessoas mais podem realizar seus sonhos também.
No dia de pegar essa blusa, eu disse é sonho, porque meu sonho era vestir essa blusa.
Aqui foi o lugar onde eu pude fazer essa junção da educação com a música e aqui eu me sinto em casa, ou até melhor que em casa.
Olá, agora o áudio está funcionando? Então, meu nome é Felipe Soares, eu sou produtor cultural do IFPE. Nós estamos iniciando a programação da tarde da Mostra Integrada de Cultura e Artes, MICA, que acontece pela 7ª edição, atualmente em formato digital e remoto. Então, hoje a gente vai contar com a participação de uma querida amiga nossa, que é a Bonny Chung, Ok, mano? E Alan Lima, professor do campus Igaraçu, vai dar o suporte, né? Vai ajudar na comunicação. Possivelmente vai também aparecer aqui na telinha. Então, a gente vai nós vamos fazer a transmissão agora e essa apresentação será gravada e também será disponibilizada no YouTube no momento que você pode escolher a tradução simultânea, por exemplo. Então, nós vamos fazer a apresentação em inglês e depois a gente pode estar fazendo essa tradução quando a imagem estiver gravada, né? Seja bem-vinda, Bonny. Seja bem-vinda, Alan. Nós vamos falar um pouco sobre cultura, gênero, etnia. E aí eu passo a palavra para Bonny.
Okay. Should I start, Alan?
I believe you should start since Felipe already introduced you. So feel free to start. Just share your screen.
Thanks. Okay, hi everyone. My name's Bonny, as Felipe's just introduced me. I don't speak any Portuguese, I'm sorry, or not much anyway, so I'm going to give this presentation in English. I'm here today to talk to you all about running comms and events during the pandemic and some of the achievements we've made and some of the challenges associated with that as well. So, Alan, do you want to translate that bit?
Of course, Bonny told you guys that she. Oh, sorry. I was just rephrasing you. Anyway, Bonny disse que ela, né, vai falar de algumas coisas relacionadas à cultura, né, que ela trabalha lá no Reino Unido, tá? E também coisas relacionadas, né, ao próprio trabalho dela. E as questões que eles conseguiram resolver no contexto da pandemia, tá? Então, nesse sentido, né? Bonny, feel free to start your presentation, please.
Sure, thanks. Okay, so, yeah, as I said, I'm here to talk to you about how I've run virtual events during COVID. So firstly, I think it'll be useful for me to say that my name's Bonny Chung, and I'm a policy advisor at the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, which is a UK government department. I'm a civil servant there, and as part of my corporate contribution, so which is voluntary work, I also run the communications and events for our network, which is called BAMEnet. You can see that in the bottom corner there, that's BAME Network. And yeah, normally the word BAME stands for Black, Asian and minority ethnic, because these are the minority groups that exist in the UK. But that word sometimes has a bit of contention because some people don't like to be grouped with other minority ethnic groups. So for us, the BAME and BAMEnet stands for Be Always Mindful of Ethnicity. Alan, would you like to translate there?
Sure. Bonny falou, né, do trabalho dela, especialmente no âmbito, né, do governo do Reino Unido, né, nas questões aí da questão de housing, né, que é basicamente moradia, né, e a questão das comunidades, tá? Além disso, né, ela falou que ela trabalha com as minorias e uma coisa importante que ela disse foi que, né, assim, às vezes as minorias elas não gostam de ser tratadas como minorias, né, todas diferentes minorias colocadas no mesmo, digamos assim, balaio, né? Então, isso gera um pouco de conflito também. Bonny?
Thank you. Thanks, Alan. So, yeah, the reason that BAMEnet exists is so that we can improve outcomes for our Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff that work for the department, as well as the wider communities. What we here in the UK, what the UK government wants now is for the civil service to reflect the communities that we serve. And so we exist to work with people like HR so that we can improve policies that affect people of ethnic minority that work within the department, as well as running events to raise awareness and to for better enable solidarity between ethnic minority groups and how we can improve outcomes for these people. Way that I run events specifically is that we have a calendar of key diversity race days. So this is basically this basically highlights a number of the very key sort of celebrations and anniversaries, etc., that we have in the UK, and we'll celebrate those usually with an event and panel members, or by writing blogs, and I'll go on to that in a bit more detail later. But this year, I wanted to focus on the events that we've been running this year. So this year, when I joined the department in March, I immediately joined the network and have been working really hard as like the comms and events lead there. So some events that I've been running have been to celebrate so in June, to celebrate Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month, because the UK has a long history, particularly in Ireland, where people from abroad, traditionally like Romania and the Middle Eastern countries, with sort of a traveller and a nomadic history, used to come over and set up camp here. Obviously, these people are more marginalised in society because they don't tend to integrate with wider society, but also because when they do come over to the country, they don't send their kids to school, so the kids aren't part of the school system, and thus they have a very nomadic and slightly isolated way of living that's part of their culture. And recently, you know, what with immigration being such a hot topic in the UK, these people are usually left out of the system, so they won't get the same benefits as everyone else. They are also marginalised, so kids might not have the same level of education as like another child that's the same age as them. So that it sort of but this is like as a result of their culture. So it's something that we want to celebrate. We want to celebrate their culture still, but understand that there might be disparities between these groups of people and the rest of society. The second thing that we that I ran events for was National Windrush Day. That happens on the 22nd of June every year, and what it signifies is that in 1948, there's a big boat that basically there was following World War II, there was a big shortage of staff and resources in industries like nursing, in construction, and a lot of the UK had to be reconstructed because much of the housing and land, etc., was destroyed as a result of World War II. Because of this, the government made a call to the Caribbean islands, which had been under British rule as a result of colonization, and they sent a bunch of people over, largely from the Caribbean, from all over the Caribbean, but largely from Jamaica, which arrived on the 22nd of June 1948 in the docks of Dover. And thus this sort of opened up a huge possibility for multiculturalism and for these people to sort of join in and become integrated in society. We had obviously these people being more Black and from Jamaica and the Caribbeans were subject to quite a lot of abuse and harassment when they first arrived here, because the UK, being a largely white country, was very exclusive towards these people. So that's something that we celebrated. And also recently we had something called the Windrush scandal, where these people who arrived largely without passports. They just had a piece of paper on them saying that they were allowed to work from the British government. So about 5 years ago, a number of these people actually got sent back, having settled here and having made their lives in the UK. They weren't allowed to stay here anymore because they didn't have the paperwork, and they technically weren't British citizens, despite having worked here and helped to rebuild the country. So we have a National Windrush Day to commemorate those people and to celebrate the work and the influence that they've had on British society. The next event that we celebrated was called South Asian Heritage Month, which happens between 18th of July and the 17th of August. So this month we celebrate the contributions and the positive effects of immigration from countries in South Asia. So that includes places like Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan, as well as Myanmar, I think, is included as well. So that's a month that we celebrate, because the Indian culture and the sort of South Asian culture is very prominent in a lot of cities now. And most recently, we had October, which was the UK's Black History Month. This is a month where we celebrate and give voice to the Black communities of the UK and celebrate the positive contributions of Black people, including those who came via Windrush, and including those who have perhaps ended up here as a result of colonisation, and basically celebrate the presence and the work of Black people. Alan, sorry, I've talked quite a lot. Would you like to translate?
Of course. Então, né, essa parte da apresentação, né, ela começou falando sobre o problema da representação, especialmente no âmbito do próprio governo federal britânico, né, e nos departamentos onde trabalham, né, com as minorias. Então, o governo está tentando fazer com que as pessoas que trabalham junto com as minorias também sejam, em parte, dessas minorias. E aí, especialmente, né, minorias asiáticas e negras, né. E com relação aos eventos, né, eles tem um calendário de eventos, né, e esses eventos aqui eles tentam trazer a questão da solidariedade, né, entre as minorias, tá? E aí tem vários eventos, né, como foi falado aqui, né, relacionados a essa questão, por exemplo, de raça, né, e aí eles sempre fazem, além de eventos, né, posts em blogs, campanhas na internet, etc. E, em particular, né, os eventos que ela citou, tá, tem a ver com a questão, né, dos ciganos e povos nômades, né, o Windrush Day, né, que não tem uma tradução própria para o português, mas é basicamente, pelo contexto histórico que foi passado aqui, um dia para celebrar o pessoal que veio, né, das ilhas do Caribe, né, especialmente da Jamaica, quando o Reino Unido precisou ser reconstruído após a Segunda Guerra Mundial, tá? E aí tem uma questão curiosa, porque, né, esse pessoal foi para o Reino Unido, chegou só com passaporte, né, de certa forma até vítima de racismo, e eventualmente muitos deles foram deportados, tá? E, por fim, né, tem a questão da celebração também relacionada ao sul da Ásia, né, que também tem muitos imigrantes na região. Enfim, acho que foi isso. Back to you, Bonnie.
Thank you. Okay, so now BAMEnet and myself, we've obviously celebrated those events that I've just mentioned, and now we're in the planning stages for 2022 and the key diversity race days then. So we've got the 12th of February, which is Chinese New Year. 8th of March is International Women's Day. That's going to look into, because we're a race network, that's going to look into the intersection between race and gender, and talk about how different groups within different groups of women within different ethnic minority groups are treated, and their sort of representation across society, as well as how the same problem may affect different groups differently, and what we can do to improve those outcomes. Then on the 21st of March, it's the UN Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So we will be holding celebrations for those. If it's done virtually, it's likely going to be through blogs or focus groups and chat groups around workplace harassment, bullying, discrimination, and how we can tackle those phenomena from happening. Alan, do you want to translate that one?
Yes. E aí, né, os outros eventos que o Bonnie acabou falando, né, tem a questão do Ano Novo Chinês, que também tem uma comunidade grande no Reino Unido, tá? A questão das mulheres, né, e ela fez uma observação interessante relacionada à questão que as mulheres, né, dentro da sociedade britânica são de diferentes grupos, né? Você tem mulheres de minorias distintas, mas muitas vezes os problemas que elas enfrentam são problemas similares, né? E nesse sentido, esse dia ele engloba isso tudo. E, obviamente, a questão da eliminação da discriminação racial, né? Que é um evento que eles pretendem fazer majoritariamente online hoje, mas também é muito importante. Back to you, Bonnie.
Thank you. So, as part of our communication strategy, which I lead on, how we come to making an event happen is through the planning process and through having a robust communication strategy. So as part of this, planning is really important. So I'll come up with some ideas of what we can do virtually that's inclusive for everyone and that isn't going to be too complicated in terms of tech. So once these ideas are down on paper, I then discuss them with the chair of BAMEnet, as well as the Deputy Director of Diversity and Inclusion in the department. Things that we need to discuss, being a government department, is budget. Finance is really important because we get our money from taxes essentially, and we get our funding from the taxpayer. So we don't have loads of money to spend on events like some private companies will, and so we need to be very diligent when we invite speakers and make sure that they are within budget. If they aren't, then either we negotiate with them, or if they won't negotiate, if they won't decrease their price, then we just say no to them. So that's one of the sort of challenges of working in government. Other things that we need to discuss. So our government is very stringent around the types of people that we invite to speak here. They obviously want the speakers to align with their agenda and their ambitions. So we need to do some really robust and extensive due diligence checks on our speakers as well. I obviously discuss the event type and format with the chair of BAMEnet as well as the deputy director, so that they understand like how it's going to work and can offer their insight into my work afterwards. As part of additionally, as part of the communication strategy, we do a lot of internal blogs, which are published on the department's intranet, as well as on our Microsoft Teams channel. That's a channel that we use to communicate with our staff. We have an internal events calendar as well, which presents all the events that we're organising for the rest of the month and for the rest of the year. Where and this is particularly good because certain staff members who aren't involved in diversity and inclusion work can just look on there and register to our events via that. Because generally, on the whole, people look on the internet every day. Next, I will write briefings to our speakers and our department's race champion for her to open the event and present her senior civil servant presence there to open the event, so that the audience participating know that it's being overseen by someone of a very senior rank. I'll then obviously do all the logistical stuff like speaking to IT and scheduling a tech check to ensure that people's Wi-Fi connections are working fine, the sound and the camera, presentations and audience functions are fine as well. And that just ensures that any event can be really smooth running. Next, we have what's called an Eventbrite page. So that's a website where you can publish your own events and do your own blurbs, speaker biographies and things. We use that because we've got a subscription to it, so it's a lot cheaper for us. But also it provides us with really good analytics and data on attendance, as well as like people's email addresses, so we can actually filter out any on the whole, we organize events for other civil servants across different departments, and so being able to filter out email addresses is really useful for us because we don't really want anyone from outside of the civil service coming in and then reporting us to the press. So yeah, it's also really useful for sending out emails to everyone who's registered, because there's a function that does that, and it just makes the technology and the logistical process much easier. And it's also having the important data in the background as well gives myself and anyone who's organising with me, as well as the chair and the deputy director, some good data to inform how we might improve our events in future. And then in the spirit of what's called continuous improvement, I'll design, develop and send out post-event surveys, and in order to gain feedback on which speakers were popular, what aspect of the event was good. So if it was like a panel event, for example, and there was a really strong appetite for doing paneling events again, then we're likely to do that again in future. Over to you, Alan, for the translation.
Nesse ponto agora, né, Bonny basicamente explicou todo o processo que eles utilizam, né, dentro do governo do Reino Unido, no departamento que ela trabalha, para a realização dos eventos, tá? Então, nesse sentido, né, ela lida com coisas, né, como os próprios diretores dela, os superiores, né, que ela tem que explicar o que é o evento, porque é importante, até por conta do orçamento do evento, que é outro ponto que, como o dinheiro, né, dos orçamentos dos eventos que ela organiza vem do impostos, né, esse orçamento ele tem que ser muito bem gasto, muito bem justificado. E aí, né, de certa forma, os eventos, né, que eles constroem lá, tem, né, um certo alinhamento com as próprias políticas públicas do governo, então isso tem que estar, né, muito bem, digamos assim, organizado nesse sentido, né. Há uma divulgação interna do evento, inclusive contendo briefings, né, que são enviados para o próprio pessoal do departamento, dos departamentos do governo. Tem a questão da logística do evento, né, que aí envolve a questão de tecnologia, áudio, né, entre outros fatores, e também o que ela passou mais tempo falando no final, né, outra coisa muito importante, que é a forma que, digamos assim, o cadastro que eles usam, né, para os integrantes do evento, inscrições e por aí vai, que foi o Eventbrite que ela falou, né? Especialmente a questão dos e-mails, que é muito importante saber filtrar os e-mails, né, para direcionar a divulgação dos eventos corretos para as pessoas corretas. E, por fim, a questão do feedback, né, que eles estão sempre tentando pegar feedback sobre os eventos que foram realizados para que o próximo evento seja melhor, né? E assim eles vão melhorando os eventos. Back to you, Bonny.
Thanks, Alan. So yeah, I just wanted to, before I finish off, I just wanted to let you know about some achievements in terms of our virtual events this year. So to your left, I said before that we celebrated Windrush Day. So what we did for that particular event was we invited the lady on the very left there. Her name's Paulette Simpson. She is a Jamaican woman, and she's done a lot of work in the Windrush space to try and firstly get some of those people who were deported back into the country and lobby the government in sort of deporting them in the first place, and essentially tearing apart families because people were deported who weren't citizens, but their children might have been because they were born and raised in the UK. So she is very famous in the sort of Jamaican and Windrush movement community. She's also been the CEO of the Jamaican National Banking Group here, as well as now she's the CEO for a newspaper called The Voice, which is very celebrates the achievements and the work of Black Caribbean communities in the UK. So that was one event that we ran on the 23rd of June. The next event that I am very proud to talk about is the Black History Month that we collaborated and partnered with councils and local authorities in the southwest of England to mark Black History Month. And this was particularly great, beneficial for me, and an event that I'm particularly proud of because, firstly, a lot of the civil service departments are located in Whitehall, which is in London. So a lot of the focus, a lot of the ministers, the politicians, as well as the job opportunities and the interesting work is centered in London. So we, as a race network, wanted to extend that out beyond London and work with some councils to produce something tangible. I'm from the southwest. I live in Bristol, which is located in the southwest. So it seemed really fitting that we could start there and use that as an experiment to sort of test whether we can continue these partnerships in the future, as well as being a model for other local authorities and other parts of the country to join up with us in the future on events. The second thing that made me really proud of this event was the speaker lineup that we had. So in partnering with a number of organisations in the Southwest, we were able to pull together funding from each organisation, which meant that our budget was a lot larger than running an event on our own. So we invited 4 keynote speakers there. One the first speaker was called David Olusoga. He is a really famous professor in the UK and runs a number of television shows on the BBC, which is our national television corporation. And he received a lot of critical acclaim. He's got a number of TV shows on there that talk about colonization and how the Black communities of the UK have sort of resulted as a result of colonization, as well as the kind of infrastructure and institutional racism that go on today, and how he also offers recommendations on how we can improve those. The second speaker we had was a lady called June Sarpong. She, from a very young age, was a very big TV personality here, and also a really famous presenter as well. She does a lot of work on diversity and inclusion and improving representation of Black people in different culture sectors and spaces in society. The third person that we invited was the gentleman that you see there on screen with me. His name's Stuart Lawrence. Now, this is a bit of a sad story. Stuart Lawrence's brother, Stephen Lawrence, is really famous and well known in the UK because he was actually stabbed and killed waiting for a bus in 1993 under some pretty horrific circumstances. And the attack was hate-fueled, and it was purely racist. The 5 men who were charged and eventually jailed for killing him actually, I think, went to school with Stephen and Stuart, who you see there. Basically, their case highlighted how the police really, and the criminal justice system here, really let them down. Their case was dragged on for over 10 years, I think. And only in, was it 2007, I believe, was the, don't quote me on that, but it was around 2007. Despite the crime happening in 1993, it wasn't until past the year 2000 that those 5 men were brought to justice. Then the fourth person that we invited was a famous footballer in the Premier League called Anton Ferdinand. He's brothers with Rio Ferdinand, and he talked a lot about racism in football and how the Football Association, whilst largely supportive, need to do better to avoid things like people making racist chants when Black footballers come, or like, you know, the barrage of assaults and like racism they get on social media when a Black football player misses a goal, for example. So just a couple of achievements. Alan, I'm going to pass to you before I finish.
Great. Com relação, né, a essa última sessão, tá? Bonny falou, né, dos diversos eventos que ela tem desenvolvido, aqueles que ela mais, assim, né, nos últimos tempos achou mais interessante. Então, com relação ao Windbrush Day, ela falou, né, da questão, né, que ela falou, né, que trouxe para falar uma senhora chamada Paulette, né, que é uma pessoa que tem uma presença muito forte nessa questão da luta, né, contra a deportação de pessoas de origem jamaicana que moram no Reino Unido. Então, ela ajudou a manter crianças no país, ajudou pessoas a voltarem, e é responsável por um jornal, né, chamado The Voice. Com relação ao mês da História Negra, né, ela falou que é um dos eventos que ela sente, né, Bonny se sente mais orgulhosa por ter realizado, e, né, antigamente as coisas eram feitas mais em Londres mesmo, né, e aí foi bom porque ela conseguiu fazer na cidade dela, de Bristol, né, que é uma cidade um pouco distante lá de Londres, né, e, inclusive, um dos eventos que ela desenvolveu nesse contexto, né, contou com 4 principais, né, assim, palestras, tá, contou, inclusive, com financiamento externo, né, o pessoal com o dinheiro do governo que ele foi feito, e aí ela pôde trazer pessoas, né, relativamente famosas na comunidade inglesa, né? Então trouxe um professor que trabalhava com a visão crítica da questão da colonização e do racismo, inclusive um professor, né, que participa de programas na BBC, né, pôde trazer também mulheres para falar da questão da diversidade, né? Trouxe também um exemplo, né, de um irmão, né, de um rapaz que foi morto por um crime de ódio no Reino Unido, e que o crime foi só em 93, né, e as 5 pessoas envolvidas nesse crime só tiveram sua sentença, né, decretada pelo governo em 2007, né, então demorou bastante. e o irmão, né, de um famoso jogador de futebol da Premier League, né, Ferdinand, que aí falou sobre a questão do racismo no futebol, né, questões como, por exemplo, quando um jogador negro perde um gol na Premier League, ele é muito mais criticado, né, do que um jogador que não é negro, e assim por diante. Back to you, Bonnie.
Thanks, Alan. Just really quickly to finish off, because I appreciate I've taken quite a lot of time. I just wanted to run through the challenges of running race events, particularly when you're working for the government, the UK government as well. So firstly, I've already said budget's a big problem and can be very, very restrictive. So because we're funded by the people's taxes, so we're accountable to the taxpayer. We don't have a lot of money to spend on speakers. So generally we'll invite people from other government departments or other public sector departments so that they don't charge too much. Another thing, because our government is particularly interested in having speakers that align with their type of thinking, it's really important that we do due diligence checks on speakers. So, you know, looking at their social media accounts, for example, and as well as any sort of press and articles and media articles, and make sure you check that they haven't in the past said anything against our government. That can be very challenging, and it's happened before where we invited a speaker to come and then had to cancel them last minute and manage that relationship very sensitively because they had said something against the government before that wasn't seen as appropriate. And another thing, so I've kind of brushed over it, but press and handling is really important, and understanding the sensitivity around events is super important. Obviously, you want to be able to manage relationships well, so that if you're cancelling a speaker, that you do it in a way that doesn't completely close off that relationship and means that you can potentially invite them for something else in the future. Being obviously under the sort of eye of the press and sometimes of the public in a virtual event, as we have had things leaked before, so it's also really important that we have boundaries set, as well as certain restrictions. So I was saying earlier that we filter out anyone without a gov.uk email address, and that's purely because we've had people come into our events and then leak things or like report us for doing something, for mishandling something or doing something wrong, and then you've got to get press office involved, and then it gets reported to the press, and then we have to get our internal press and comms people involved to try and like fight off questions, essentially. Time constraints is another big thing. Sometimes we will get commissioned to do a piece of work with a very short deadline, and it's about pooling together and like joining up in a very short amount of time to publish an event and make sure that it's well attended. And yeah, sometimes that can be really, really stressful, and you kind of have to drop all your other work to do it. I think the last thing that is a challenge but can also be a benefit is the fact that what I do in terms of comms and events is voluntary. It's part of my my remit as a civil servant, and it's my corporate contribution. So that is difficult because obviously my day job and my main duties and responsibilities should take priority. But on months like Black History Month, where there's events going on every day and I'm responsible for them and I'm leading on them, it can be quite difficult to manage the workload and the time associated with that. So yeah, that's everything from me for today. I'd like to thank you all for having me. And yeah, I'll hand back to Alan for translation before you ask me any questions.
Perfect. E aí, né, a apresentação foi encerrada, tá? Com o Bonny falando sobre os principais desafios que ela tem enfrentado no desenvolvimento, né, dos eventos dentro do trabalho dela, né? A questão dos orçamentos, tá? Que são orçamentos que são bem restritos, né? E ela tem que trabalhar com isso, e aí muitas vezes isso acaba influenciando até nas pessoas que são convidadas, né? Que eles convidam pessoas que cobram relativamente pouco para falar nos eventos. A questão do perfil dos palestrantes, né? Que o governo do Reino Unido tem uma política estrita, né, de financiar eventos onde as pessoas não têm o histórico de falar mal do governo, né? Então, já houve casos, por exemplo, de eles terem que cancelar alguma palestra de última hora por conta disso, né? Depois que fizeram a avaliação de mídias sociais e outras coisas da pessoa, viram que era uma pessoa que era contra o governo, né? A questão da imprensa também é um desafio para eles, porque às vezes, né, as coisas acabam vazando antes do tempo, ou alguém interpreta, né, de maneira equivocada o que eles estão desenvolvendo e acabam fazendo alguma denúncia, isso sai na imprensa, né? E aí isso gera também um pouco de estresse para eles nesse sentido. A questão do tempo, né, especialmente a falta de tempo, então, muitas vezes tem muitas coisas que ela vem desenvolvendo em paralelo, e quando chega um momento de um evento desses, ela tem que focar naquilo que, na execução do evento em si, né, na parte que realmente importa. E no final das contas, né, tudo isso é um serviço voluntário, então ela tem que combinar isso com o resto da vida dela, né, no caso, trabalho, enfim. E muitas vezes consome um tempo enorme, né, da vida dela trabalhar como voluntária para o Serviço Social Britânico. Mas, enfim, acho que é isso. Thank you very much, Bonnie. It was a pleasure to listen to you today. If you have any closing remarks, I will start reading our chat at YouTube to see if there is any questions, and I will translate them to you in the meantime.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Alan, for translating so well and so diligently. Yeah, that's everything. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please let me know.
Oh, I actually have a couple of questions. In preparations before this presentation, I was studying your work in the past, and I was discussing it with Philippe. And it is cool because you have this, this part of your work that's basically culture, things like dancing and so on, and this part that is actually working for the minorities. And I would like to ask you, what are the challenges when they cross over with each other? Because they have intersections anyway,
Okay, so my work doing dance and stuff is mainly, so I teach swing dancing in my spare time, and that is separate from my work doing diversity, inclusion, and culture. My work doing diversity and inclusion and race equality stuff is all a part of my day job as a civil servant. So that's kind of confined within the 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. office hours kind of time, whereas my work teaching dance falls outside of that, and I have to manage all that myself. I think the challenges associated with that are time management. Obviously, sometimes if I'm away on business, I might have to cancel a class, for example, or rearrange it so that I can best serve my student and ensure that they have the regular class, as well as ensuring that all my work responsibilities are attended to and cared for.
Eu perguntei para a Bonny, né, a respeito dos demais trabalhos que ela desenvolve, né, especialmente as questões relacionadas à cultura, até porque a gente está no evento de cultura. E, né, ela falou que ela também trabalha como instrutora de dança e que muitas vezes, né, tem um conflito de horário entre os dois trabalhos. E às vezes ela tem, inclusive, que gerenciar, né, essa questão do tempo dela, porque às vezes está fazendo trabalho, né, como servidora do governo federal, né, do Reino Unido, e também, né, tem que dar as aulas dela, eventualmente ela cancela uma aula e por aí vai, tá bom? Bonny, another question that I have to you is about the challenges of the minorities, especially in your region, around Bristol and neighborhood cities, because I went to the UK in the past, and it's interesting because big cities like London, you have lots of diversity. People from basically every single place in the world, and they work in the many distinct professions, like, in a grocery store, in a hotel, in some tourist business, and so on. But once you go to the countryside, I don't know, in places like for instance, Liverpool, the diversity is quite smaller compared to London. And I imagine that that represents some challenges to the minorities, you know, because the communities are not as big as representative as they are in London. And looking especially at the Bristol region, I was reading these days some newspapers from the UK, and I could find that in Bristol there is some sort of crisis relating to housing, and at the same time the whole UK, the COVID pandemic make some sort of increases in the rates of homophobia, transphobia, and crimes related to gender as well. So how do you see this whole context of the UK, and especially in your region?
So the challenges in my region, it's quite difficult to answer like any challenges, but Bristol itself is very diverse compared to other cities. So you mentioned Liverpool. I think compared to Liverpool, Bristol is a lot more diverse. Where like representation is lacking are in the towns and the villages around Bristol, because they are, as you've pointed out, very remote, and usually house prices there are a lot more expensive because you're in an essentially what people know as like a middle class area, but also you have more land and bigger houses there as well. So you've got the kind of benefits of a quiet life and having a larger estate. And this could be, in my opinion, more detrimental to cultural representation and diversity, because essentially it caters for a class of people that have a certain amount of money, aka rich people, and that perpetuates from generation to generation. So unless affordable housing is built there, which the government are working to do, as well as social housing, then it's going to be harder for minority ethnic groups to integrate with those residents that are there now. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
You wanted more about challenges?
I have another question, but first let me translate the answer, please.
Okay.
Eu perguntei para Bonnie, né, a respeito da diversidade no Reino Unido, em particular dentro da região, né, que ela mora hoje ao redor de Bristol, né. E ela falou que, comparado com outras cidades do interior do Reino Unido, né, fora da capital, Londres, há mais diversidade em Bristol, né, do que na média. Porém, as cidades ao redor de Bristol, essa diversidade não é tão grande assim, né. Inclusive, isso tem relação até, às vezes, um pouco com o preço das casas, porque as pessoas de classe média vão morando lá, né? E na Inglaterra, as pessoas de classe média são as pessoas mais brancas. E é até um pouco complicada essa situação, porque, no final das contas, há uma perpetuação, né? Desses fatores, porque as minorias, né? Elas não têm acesso a esses espaços de classe média, né? Espaços adequados, e aí fica difícil, né? Elas eventualmente terem poder aquisitivo para comprar, né, as coisas. E, enfim, ter uma vida normal de classe média. Anyway, I have one last question, and it is about, most of the society here in Brazil as well. It depends, of course, of the cities, the district, and so on. But when it comes to diversity in Brazil, society is very diverse. But at the same time, there are some people, especially from the middle class, that have very progressive discourse. I am pro the LGBTQ cases, I am pro diversity, I'm against any kind of prejudice, and so on. But besides the progressive discourse, what people that aren't actually perceived as a minority, in your opinion, could do to help, tackle this challenge of the prejudice in the society. So you have, any suggestions and tips in that regards?
So I would say, so this is a really, really topical theme in the UK as well. And I think a large part of this, so these middle-class progressive people, they need to start acting and being a bit more proactive, being allies to those. So allyship is a word that's very, very buzzy and topical in the UK at the moment. They need to be good allies, try and understand issues and the kind of like cultural backlashes and even racial backlashes that their minority ethnic friends or colleagues go through. And sometimes those challenges can be physical, they can be tangible, but sometimes they're not. And these things in English are called microaggressions and micro behaviors that you can't actually see, but you just know that you've been singled out or excluded because potentially because of your race or your gender, or because you might have a disability or something. I think these people, these progressives who have influence and who have power, need to start using that leverage to try and help change policy, or to implement policy that improves the results and like process for their minority ethnic friends or colleagues.
Excellent. I will translate and then we will finish the presentation. Eu perguntei para a Bonny, né, a respeito do que pessoas que não são, de fato, percebidas pela sociedade como minorias, né, mas que possuem essa percepção, né, digamos assim, uma visão progressista da sociedade, né, onde o preconceito não deve ser permitido, né, onde as causas LGBTQ devem ser respeitadas, por aí vai, elas podem fazer para além da posição retórica, né, de simplesmente dizer que é a favor. Então, ela disse que a primeira coisa é se aliar as pessoas, né, as minorias no caso, para poder compreender os problemas das minorias, né, de maneira mais clara, né, e além disso, né, ela falou também de uma coisa que ocorre muito no Reino Unido e que, de certa forma, né, eu acho que no Brasil tem um paralelo também. No caso, o termo que ela usou foi microaggression, né, que seria basicamente coisas menores, tá, eventos de preconceito, racismo, etc., menores, né, que não são tão claros assim, mas que eles são percebidos, né, pela pessoa que sofreu e por pessoas que têm o olho mais treinado, né. E aí ela falou que, no final das contas, né, as pessoas que têm, digamos assim, essa condição, né, de classe média ou nessa posição de ser percebido pela sociedade não como minoria, no caso, por exemplo, da sociedade brasileira, uma pessoa branca, de que ela tem que usar essa posição, né, para poder, digamos assim, transformar, né, esse, entre aspas, poder de classe média em coisas concretas, né, transformar, realizar mudanças de fato. I guess that's it, Bonny. Felipe, if you don't mind, I would like to pass the word to you to make the closing remarks. Bonny, you have anything left to say?
Actually, I was going to say, so this is a really big question, and the answer's like never ever going to be answered. Well, sorry, no, that's really negative. It can't be answered in just a 1 hour session. The problems that every country faces with inequalities, whether it's to do with race, gender, any type of diversity, they've been ingrained in the country's history for a long time, and they, you know, as things sort of develop, more problems come out of it. As society develops, more problems will be created. And so I think for these middle class people, these progressives, you're not going to solve it overnight. And these are problems that you have to sort of keep working at, and you know, through a step-by-step approach, so that you can basically get the best and most inclusive outcome. Don't expect that just because you've done one talk or something that allyship is going to be the main buzzword the next day, or that racism is going to go away the next day, because that is a bit too idealistic. There's also a sort of running argument at the moment that actually Black people should be allies to the white people, and that women should be allies to men in achieving gender equality, because why should we, as the marginalized groups, be responsible for undoing all the work that's been done by, you know, your white predecessors, your male predecessors? That is a very progressive argument that's going on in the UK at the moment, as well as a lot of discussion around performative allyship, and whether you're actually only being an ally to someone to raise your own stakes. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. But honestly, I could talk about this for days. So I need to give you guys back some time. But yeah, just my closing remarks.
Thank you. I will translate it. Bonny complementou a resposta sobre a pergunta, né, do que as pessoas podem fazer para além do discurso progressista, né? E ela falou assim, a primeira coisa que a pessoa precisa ter em mente é que essas coisas, os problemas, eles não se resolvem da noite para o dia, né? Então, vai levar tempo para se resolver, né? Não basta apenas ser aliado, né, das causas, tá? E quando a pessoa, né, faz uma fala e tal, a favor de uma determinada posição de uma minoria, né, não necessariamente isso vai, né, resolver o problema no dia seguinte, né? Inclusive, no Reino Unido tem algumas discussões interessantes nesse sentido, que né, às vezes as pessoas se alinham só por se aliar mesmo, né, no sentido assim, de interesses pessoais e tal, e não por questões mais, digamos assim, de visão de mundo, ok? Eu acho que é isso, né? Felipe, faça aí o encerramento. Agradeço a Bonny.
Agora foi. Então, Bonny, muito obrigado pela fala, pela presença, né, pela discussão. A gente percebe que os problemas às vezes são bem parecidos com os do Brasil, muito embora com realidades bem diferentes, né? Mas existe essa proximidade. A gente termina a fala de hoje compreendendo um pouco sobre a realização de eventos culturais ou de ações culturais no formato digital. Então, em função da hora, eu agradeço, Bonny, agradeço a Alan pela força. Muito obrigado a vocês. Espero que vocês estejam bem, que possam dar prosseguimento às atividades. Convido o Bonny, convido a Alan para às 19 horas aqui no Brasil, aí em Bristol 21 horas.
29 horas. 7. A hora de comer.
E aí a gente vai dando prosseguimento à Mostra Integrada de Cultura e Artes, certo? Nós ficamos por aqui, e aí eu deixo um abraço para vocês que ficam aí. Após a gravação, vai ser mais fácil ouvir o áudio e a descrição em português, para quem não pode entender. Então, fechamos por aqui. Até mais.
Tchau, pessoal.